Good day, everyone. Today I am going to talk about the significance of optical illusion, optical correction, and visual balance in calligraphy and font design. I will be talking about three things in today's talk. First is about some of the optical illusions in fonts. Then we move on to calligraphy with a focus on brush pen calligraphy. And then the third part will be on Mullal layer, illusion, and serifs in typography. So, first is I will take a brief look into some of the optical illusions found in font design. So, all the typography enthusiasts and all font designers are trained and aware of all this illusion. There are 100 different ways of correcting the optical illusions in font design. I'm just sharing a few to start the background information for the main focus on the calligraphy thing. So I've taken Roboto Black as the starting point as an example for showing the illusions. So one is that in all monolinear fonts, special care is taken by the font designer to create an illusion of equal thickness. In mathematical terms, none of the strokes are of equal thickness, but visually, we create an appeal, we create an illusion of the strokes being of equal thickness. If you look at the mathematical values, the vertical stroke is much thicker than the horizontal stroke. But because of certain aspects of the eye and the way we perceive things, we have to do this kind of corrections to achieve a illusion or appearance of a font where all the strokes appear to be of the same thickness. The same thing happens with the way we use the crossbars and the way we use the centering of elements inside a font. So there is this concept of optical center and the mathematical center. So in typography, whenever we design fonts, we always keep the optical center. So optically, we do the compensation for optical illusions and get the feeling that the units are balanced, the negative space is balanced, it appears to be balanced. So in this case, the same character, there are three different ways of aligning the crossbars. So when we look carefully, the one of them appears to be more visually balanced than the others. So this is the reason for that. That it is kept, the crossbar is kept at the optical center, and in the right one, the middle one, the mathematical center, it is kept, and the third one, it is kept in the below the center. So this is taught in most of the design schools. Whenever we design fonts, we take conscious decisions to place elements in such a way that it compensate for the optical illusions. Then we create an illusion of equal height. All the characters in any font, if you take, they appear to be of the same height, but in mathematical terms, they are never of the same height. So many places, you will see concept is called the overshoot, that we keep curves protrude above the cap height, and at the bottom it goes below the baseline. So this is commonly used in all languages or in all font design activities to create an illusion of equal height. So this applies to almost all the languages, all the scripts. So it is a conscious decision, and this is also taught to the font designer to create this kind of overshoots to compensate for the optical illusion. So it is a conscious decision taken by designers. And if you look at X, for example, X is a treasure. of examples of optical correction in typography. So there are 100 things to learn from the design of this letter X. So if you take the angle of one stroke, it will not be matching the corresponding stroke above the middle line. So there are a lot of optical corrections done by the font designer to compensate for the movement of the eye and the perception of getting a symmetrical visual structure. So there are a lot of this kind of corrections done in this letter form X. It itself is a very important lesson in font design itself. And if you look at many other characters, for example, if you take lowercase b, for example, that the corresponding lines might not be the matching each other, and a lot of corrections are done in the negative spaces where a curved structure goes and meets the vertical stem. These are all done consciously to compensate for the optical illusions. If you like, universe black is a wonderful example of how optical corrections are done, and you can see the negative space, the ellipse, how it intrudes into the stem, cutting across the mathematical guideline. So this is a very good example of how optical corrections are done in Roman typography. I will move on to optical illusions in brush pen calligraphy. The important thing in brush pen calligraphy is that in most of the other calligraphic activities is that these are not conscious decisions. These are all visual based decisions taken many times subconsciously taken by calligraphers. But in reality, they are all doing it to compensate for certain optical illusions. The big contrast between this and the font design activity is that most of these things are, this kind of optical corrections are not taught in calligraphy classes, but most of the calligraphers, subconscious level, you can see, observe, they all do that to compensate for. So it must be something which is intuition based. So I found it fascinating when I learned brush pen calligraphy that by default this comes into any visual sensitive person that a lot of strokes we do deliberately do some offset or change in the angles to compensate for optical corrections. So this is if you look at lowercase h, this is the way the sequence of strokes is. The first one is a upward stroke, and the after that you make a pause here, and then you deliberately do a change in the angle of the upstroke and then take it down. So this change in angle is very deliberate, and in a subconscious level we are doing this to compensate for this thick stroke over passing over it. So it is an interesting example of optical corrections done totally through intuition and through visual sensitivity rather than going by a structured learning process. So this is a very interesting example of how calligraphers do optical corrections. These are not documented or these are not taught with a specific focus that why we are doing it. But lots of calligraphers, especially in brush pen calligraphy, they do a lot of this kind of optical corrections. So this conscious decision is what I would like to focus on in optical illusion in calligraphy. So this is done in so many other characters whenever we do brush lettering. Another character is lowercase d. Also, you can see how the strokes are, the angles are changing whenever there is a thick stroke overlapping this kind of a diagonal stroke. So this keeps on repeating in many of the characters in brush pen calligraphy. This is lowercase l. And lowercase b also is a wonderful example of how optical corrections are done and certain design decisions are taken to improve the legibility of the character. K, low, this is lowercase k. Again, this change in the angle of the upstrokes. And another interesting thing about brush script calligraphy is that brush pen calligraphy is that some of the characters shoot above the excite deliberately to create, but it creates an illusion of being on the same height, and it is done deliberately to create or improve the legibility of the character. Lowercase r is a very good example of that. In most of the brush pen calligraphy happening across, there is a common thing that this stroke goes much above the excite and comes down. So it theoretically it is not fixing into any grid. It doesn't align into any grid, but still you can see how visually it appeals and it really increases the legibility. And if you look at certain other design decisions taken in brush pen calligraphy, is that there are a lot of deliberate decisions to improve the legibility of each letter. For example, N and U can be very confusing. So the way a lower in the upstroke meets the main stem is deliberately, instead of this, it is deliberately kept down so that this negative space contributes to improving the legibility of the letter form N. Otherwise, there is a lot of chances of N being uh, mistaken for other characters. So U is again an example where the upstroke meets the main stem much above than this way because they want this particular negative space to contribute to the legibility. So maybe it is the eye movement and the perception and the importance of negative and positive space in legibility might not have been theoretically analyzed and studied by all calligraphers. But intuition level and through visual sensitivity, all of them do this kind of uh, take this kind of decisions while doing. Again, example is the lowercase m. So there are a lot of places where they could have kept this joint up, but most of the brush pen calligraphers do this way. So it is a very clear attempt at improving the legibility without any theoretical inputs. And lot of examples we can notice in the way brush pen calligraphy is done, where this kind of optical corrections are done throughout so many letter forms. The third part I would like to take you to the Muller layer illusion and evolution of serifs. So everybody knows it is a very famous illusion that the three lines are actually of the same width, but because of the arrowheads, they appear to be of different widths. So if you look carefully, all the three lines are actually duplicated one after another. And it is this illusion is created because of the converging arrows and the diverging arrows. If I rotate this and keep it this way, and if I look at this way that this red lines are actually the same, which are duplicated, there you can see there is a lot of relationship between this and font design and typography. So I am trying to investigate into this that did it affect the usage of serifs or was this one of the reasons? There are so many reasons for our ancestors using serifs, not only because of the chisel, but a lot of other design decisions might have come into play to make use of serifs. So as a font enthusiast and a typography enthusiast, I feel that this has something to do with some of the space management decisions of font design. So, if you look carefully, we can establish the fact that this diverging lines create an impact and help a designer to create a feeling of more height than it is there. So once this is established, we can also go into another hypothesis that maybe as this angle, if you keep on changing these angles, it might have led to the realization that actually serifs help a designer to create an illusion of more height than what is there, which in turn might have helped designers to achieve more legibility and lead the eye and make the eye more comfortable in reading or identifying text. So this might have been one of the reasons why serifs became very popular. And if you look at the design of the serifs itself, it matches this thing that it creates a feeling that the stroke is actually taller than what it appears to be. So this is the point I'm trying to make, that optical illusions are very important in typography, and this particular illusion might have helped our ancestor or font designers to make use of the serifs in creative ways. American typewriter is a very good example how this diverging lines and the negative space, the triangular negative space created by this diverging lines, helps a designer to create an illusion of more height, and which in turn increases the legibility of a character. Then comes comparing Bodoni and Dido. And Meridian is a very good example how this concept of diverging lines can help achieve a feeling of more height than what is there. I would like to conclude here. There are hundreds of arguments we can make about evolution of serifs and uh, the optical illusions, but this might be one of the reasons for popularity of serifs. I am like to thank everybody, and I would like to thank Sri Ravi Shankar ji. I'd like to thank A-Type team, and I'd like to thank IDC School of Design and everybody in IIT Bombay for helping me creating this presentation. And I welcome all of you to write to me in case of any discussions we can take forward. And I'll conclude here. Thank you very much. Namaste.